I'll see you guys in the dark.
So to start off, I have had 3 stalkers in my life. One started when I was 8. The middle one happened at 16. And the last one happened when I was 22 or so. Well, let's get started. So, in pre-K, when I was 4, I met this girl that lived at the end of the street, about 5 houses down on the other side of me. My mom used to let us play a lot until weird things started happening. She taught me how to smoke cigarettes by lighting them on the exposed eye of the electric stovetop when I was 7, and had terrible asthma. Her mom had just left a pack lying around, so we took one for each of us. I got about a quarter of a puff, didn't even know how to inhale, and had to rush home to use my nebulizer. My parents both smoked in the house, so I knew they probably couldn't smell it. She, quite obviously, had an awful upbringing. Mom did drugs, yada yada. I remember there being a mattress on her floor, which makes me feel bad for her. She also always had bed bugs or lice, or even both. I don't know if she ever showered, and I flat out refused to spend the nights at her house, in all of its gross, dirty glory. She once brought her mom's loaded gun from her house, because my dad was a cop, and she wanted to show it to him. She came to my 5th birthday, brought her older sister, who wasn't invited, and then roughly 2 hours in, let it slip that her sister had strep throat. I get it way too easy, and it's always awful. My bouts with it will last a minimum of 2 months, with me vomiting nonstop the entire time I have it. Also, running a 104-degree fever is totally normal for me in that state. I also got scarlet fever once because the strep killed my immune system. To answer your question, yes, I caught it. She would get her older sister and older cousin to jump our backyard fence that was padlocked, and they would swim whenever, until my parents threatened her mom to charge them with trespassing. We asked them multiple times not to do that. Aside from being rude, if something had happened to them, my parents would be liable for it. She even got me to run away for a few hours when my parents weren't home one time. I was 8 at this time as well, and my older sister was supposed to be watching me. She would go up to strangers' front door and ask if they would adopt her because her parents died in a car crash. I called my mom about a mile up the road because I felt horrible and just wanted to go home. Thank you, nice people who live next door to the fire station. Okay, when we were 8, she dressed up as a hooker for Halloween. Yes, an 8-year-old went out for a Halloween trick-or-treating as a hooker. At some point, I just got super creeped out by her. I'm pretty sure it was when we were at a sock hop, again, age 8, and she kept trying to grind on me, and at one point was trying to fully be rubbing on me, and kept moaning right before I would shove her off. But she just kept trying until I found a teacher, and stayed next to them instead of dancing with my friends, all because of her. So, to fast forward to the stalking. When I first stopped talking to her, she would call our house non-stop, every morning, day, night, basically until midnight, and then she would start again at 6 a.m. And if we screened the calls or weren't home, she would fill up the tape on the answering machine with country songs. She'd sing along at the top of her lungs, usually sobbing and saying, "If I can't have you, no one can." I mean, she got really creepy. She would come by the house and leave love notes in my window. My room was at the 2nd floor. She would stop by when she knew I wasn't home, and would try to tell my parents to make me be her friend. She moved out before I turned 9, so this would have had to been around 1993. She would corner me in the alleyways at school, or on the bus, and would just sob, asking why I didn't want to be her friend anymore. Finally, one amazing day when I was 12, she called and gave me the best news. She was moving. My mom handed me the phone, whispered who it was, asked if I wanted to take it and talk. I said sure. She then starts telling me about the new town that she is moving to. Now she has a boyfriend, and how her older sister is in jail. I just simply responded, "Okay." I honestly don't give 2 shits about where you move, whether you are moving or where you are moving to. I couldn't care less if you were moving to China. Could you please kindly just screw off? Goodbye. My parents just stared at me in shock. I had never cursed in front of them ever. Another great part is that I didn't even get in trouble for the few words that I dropped. You think that would be the end, right? Nope, not for her. So when I was 12 and up, I was almost never at home. I was either at a friend's house, at band practice, or at softball practice. One night I came home from one of those, and my mom has this wonky look on her face, and I ask her what's going on. Did someone die? Was there an accident? You know, the normal stuff. We were 15 at this time. At this point, I was worried, and she didn't say anything for the longest time. She then starts to speak very slowly, and is kind of wincing. She finally gets it out. Kay came by. She's pregnant, and she has a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old already. She told us she would really like to see and talk to you sometime if you were up to it. Then hands me a very poorly written phone number. I crumple it in front of my mom, who is now getting her smile back, and throw it away in the kitchen trash. And just for good measure, I fill up the coffee pot and pour it over the note just to make sure that it smears. She tried to do this many, many more times, and thankfully, I was almost always gone, and hated having my parents lie to anyone on my behalf. Fast forward a couple of years, and I moved to a small town at the base of the Appalachian Mountains, about an hour north of Atlanta. I moved in 2003, and never had any issues, until 2010. I was driving a bus that I could take people around inside our country for a small price, as long as they didn't request to leave the country while on the bus. Anyways, I was picking up kids from one of our elementary schools and would take them over to the Boys and Girls Club. I get there and open the doors, and there is this heavy-set redhead that looks super familiar. I overhear a bit of the conversation. Yeah, a crapload of the community service. That's the only reason I'm here helping. It took me about 3 weeks of seeing her every day to finally click with me. It was Kay. I know this isn't a surprise to you guys, because you aren't stupid. So I hope it isn't that cringy for you. So, now since I know her name and know what she looks like, I go home and check out why she was arrested. Apparently, before Christmas one year, her and her dumbass older sister decided to go through a ton of physical mail, keeping all the checks, cash, gift cards, etc. They obviously got caught doing this, and they also had unregistered firearms and a huge amount of drug convictions and charges that were still pending. Anyways, I show her and her sister's mugshot to my hubby, and even send them to my mom over text. I knew she would get a kick out of them. Go forward about 12 years more. Hubby, kids, and I are at our favorite Mexican place. We are sitting in our favorite booth, in a little alcove that has maybe 6 full booths, and about 5 tables on the other side of the middle of the walkway. They usually will put you there if you ask, especially to stay away from noisy kids, or keep your noisy kids away from everyone else. Because of this, it is the last place to fill up. So I'm sitting next to my hubby, inhaling some chorizo street tacos, when I hear her voice directly behind me. I eavesdrop on the conversation, because I recognize the voice. She was higher than a damn plane. I'm honestly not sure how she didn't. It wasn't exactly a surprise to see her like that, especially since she had all the meth and coke charges against her. She had come in with her boyfriend, and they sat there while I was stuffing my face with yummy goodness. I never got up to say hi. I don't want her to know I'm living up here, and even wait to use the bathroom at our house, even though I felt like I was about to piss myself. I made it, though. So about 2 months after that, I was talking to one of my clients about the crazy twat because she was going through a divorce, and the husband was going nutty shit on her. Come to find out, Kay is really good friends with this girl. No, Kay has never a client, so it wasn't against HIPAA to talk about her, use her name, etc. Client has been talking about her. She has an awful reputation, is known for stealing to get drug money, not taking care of her home or her kids, basic stuff that she just didn't feel like doing. She has 5 kids from 5 different baby daddies, starting with getting pregnant at 12. 12? She had her first baby at the age of 13, and had one every 2 years after, and had lost all of them to the foster care system. At least it shows some people can't just hang on long enough to keep their kids, which is the saddest thing of all. P.S. She still messages me or my parents and have showed up uninvited. I'm really hoping that Kay never finds out where I'm living. My second stalker we'll name E. E and I met through my husband's best friend, T, who was dating her at the time. At first, she was okay. A little immature, and about 4 years younger than us. She did have her hooks far into my hubby's friend, though. He ended up not hanging out with us as much because he was always with her, and she was immature enough to annoy us if we were around her in large doses. About 3 years into them dating, I got a little suspicious of her because she got my best friend, Kitty, who was married to my husband's cousin, super drunk at my friend's birthday party. And then she seemed to disappear for a few hours while I was holding back Kitty's hair for her while she was meeting back up with all the alcohol, for at least 3.5 hours or so. I had noticed E's absence along with A's absence. If your wife is throwing up tons of alcohol, you'd think that you would be there for her. And this is when I started paying a bit more attention, and started to try and get closer to E to see if she would tell me if something was going on. At the time, my hubby and I were huge Gears of War fans, and played all the time, usually with Kitty, A, and a few other regulars. One day, E texted me, letting me know that she got a 360, and bought Gears of War. So that night, she got online and played with our group. Another side note, at this time, my husband worked for a company as a traveling electrician, so he would be gone for 6 weeks, come home for 3 days over a weekend, and then go back out to his job site for another 6 weeks. Occasionally his foreman would negotiate an extra weekend or two, and hubby would come home and surprise me. This is important to remember. We started playing a lot more. E, A, Kitty, and a few other friends when my husband was working out of state. I thought it was absolutely hilarious to pick on her while playing, so I would just pretend I had a lot of accidents, or said something along the lines of, "Oh shit, I'm so sorry. I thought you were, insert name." Yes, I know I was a bitch, but I really didn't like or trust her very much. One night, we started playing together, and we were talking over the headsets in a party, and my husband called out 9. We had been in the party 10 minutes, because it took longer than usual to wrangle up my 4-month-old and 2-year-old into bed. So she was already pissed that I didn't get on at 8. I told her he was calling, and I was going to mute myself, but keep playing. I had been talking to him for about 10 minutes. Literally had not stopped playing for even a second or two. And she comes over the mic with this super bitchy tone. Says, "Look, Butterfly, if you aren't going to play the game and talk to me, we just shouldn't even be playing." This really pissed me off. So in return, "Look here, you selfish little bitch. I haven't seen my husband in 5 weeks, and I miss him. This is literally the only time I will get to talk to him today. So why don't you let me know when you've pulled that giant fucking stick out of your spoiled ass?" I then immediately shut down the party, shut down the game lobby, removed her from my friends list, and blocked her on the Xbox so she couldn't even bring up my gamer tag. About 20 minutes go by, and she texts me, "Look, I'm sorry I said that. I get that you haven't seen him, so just jump back on after you get off the phone." Yeah, right. The only reason I was playing with her was so that I could see if she would tell me if she was fucking my best friend's husband or not, so I don't reply. 10 minutes later, "Look, I'm seriously sorry. You could at least not be a bitch and text me back." I need to not be a bitch? What is she on? Oh, go back to talking to my husband, who by now has heard all about it, and is trying to calm me down, so I don't wake up my girls and have an awful night ahead of me. We talk for another 45 minutes or so, and he gets off the phone to go to sleep since they have to be at the site at 6 a.m. I stayed up a little later, playing Gears of War with my friends I actually like, and told them what happened so that I could vent about it. We stayed online until about midnight, so I got up to start turning everything off as I was going to bed. One thing about our house is that I love to have our main door open, just a screen door shut so that I can look outside onto our little cul-de-sac, of which we lived in the very middle, and down in a hole. We had one neighbor on each side. On the right, my husband's mom and stepdad, and the parents on another of his best friends on the left. I put that down, so you guys could understand that we knew the two other couples really well. So we knew everyone on our street, even on the straightaway part of our cul-de-sac. There were no other houses until you turned off of our street. In the very middle of our one-lane road was a pine island, a small teardrop-shaped piece of land with 4 or 5 pine trees that we sometimes used for extra parking. As I'm going to shut, lock, and bolt our front door, I see a car in the middle of the pine island and immediately recognize it as E's vehicle. I cave in and called her and asked her, "What do you think that you're doing? You need to leave now." She just laughs like crazy. I've snapped and have a gun kind of laugh. She responds with, "Public property," and just hangs up. It's technically true that it is owned by the city and county, but all 3 property lines actually coverage into the Pine Island, so only an area about 3 feet by 3 feet is owned by the city or county. So she was also technically trespassing on all 3 parts of our properties. I called 911 and let them know that E and I had argued and exactly where she was parked. They asked how long she had been there, so I told them that I didn't know, but I last talked to her about 9:30, and she was at her house then, so it was sometime after that when she arrived. But I didn't see her arrive either, which means she had her headlights off. Otherwise, I would have seen her pull in since the door is right in front of the island and our driveway, and at the very least, I could have seen her headlights on the walls. If she had the headlights on, though, she would have blinded me since the recliner I sat in was exactly against the back wall directly in front of the door. So I explained all this to the dispatcher, and she asked if E was approaching me, and I tell her no, she's just sitting in her car. She asked if she had tried to contact me by phone, and I told her, again, how I called her last and what we said. The dispatcher says, "Well, right now she technically is on public property, hasn't called or approached you, so there isn't anything really we can do. If she threatens you, just call us back and let us know." We hang up, and I'm just thinking, great. Now I have a crazy pants staring at my house, and my husband is like 9 states away and won't be back for at least a week. I go ahead upstairs and get ready for bed, taking out my contacts, pulling my phone on the charger, shower, change, and go back downstairs. Now it's about 1:30 a.m., and she is still sitting there. I not only deadbolt the front door, but I lock the screen, pull the slide bolt, and lock the doorknob. I also go and pull the slide bolts over the door to the garage basement and the back door, since our slide bolts can only be opened from the inside. And now I'm super paranoid. Something that really sucks about being paranoid, it makes insomnia so much worse. I probably went downstairs every 30 minutes to see if she was there. Spoiler, she was. Since my kids were young, I thankfully didn't have to worry about them going to school yet, or anything else. And because of my husband always being gone, I didn't have to work either. I kept checking on to see if she was there or not, about every hour or so, whether I fell asleep or not. She ended up staying in her car, never moving to go somewhere to pee or eat for like 9 days, until my husband came home. Therefore, I didn't leave my house for 9 days. I thankfully had enough groceries to last me and my girls. Especially one was still on formula, and I even ordered a small pizza every day just to bug her, hoping that if I made her hungry enough, she would leave to go to eat. So my husband gets home, walks up to her window, and threatens her. E then has the nerve to call the cops on my husband. 2 of our city's finest come out and start getting statements from all of us. I explain and show pictures that I took each day and night, along with screen caps to show day and time, so they can see how long she has been sitting there, staring at my house. I explain that I wasn't going to leave my home with my 2 young children, since she hasn't even left to go to the bathroom or eat. By the way, her car was filled with bottles, huge cups, and towels that she has been using as her toilet, and she had 4 unopened 12-packs of drinks, 2 or 3 backpacks still pretty full with food, and 1 bag that had a coffee cup warmer, which looked like she was using it to cook canned food, and a damn power converter plugged into her cigarette lighter port that even gave her 2 fucking electrical outlets. since it looked like she was planning to still stake out my house for quite a while. The cops went ahead and told her if she contacted me again, or came through the cul-de-sac, that I could file harassment and trespassing charges. And they gave her a verbal warning and escorted her out of our neighborhood. She then started messaging me on Facebook, since they didn't mention digital communication. And she kept using friends' accounts to send me more once I would block one. I had each message printed out to show the cops, but since she never typed out, "Hey butterfly, it's me E," they couldn't be sure it was her. She would still drive around on our street at least once a day for about 3 months, and I would catch her following my car when I drove around town, and me when I went into the stores or restaurants. It finally stopped when E was caught in a compromising position in a car with A, Kitty's husband, my hubby's cousin, by T, E's boyfriend. Kitty was able to go back through A's online account and found out that they only had been together for almost 2 years at this point. A and Kitty divorced. T dropped E like a hot rock and refused to talk to her, period. And E continued to try and stalk me, badly, for another 2 years, and ended up in jail for stealing over 1,000 pain meds from her pharmacy job. This one was definitely the most intense stalker I have had, and of course, he was always the one I was closest to. We will call him BC for the length, or I may switch to the asshole, LOL. BC was my first love. We started dating the second semester of 8th grade, and both had the infatuation thing going on for the first year or so of our relationship. But by the end of the 9th grade, I was over him being an asshole. He would physically abuse me, verbally abuse me, break up with me if I couldn't remember something he told me, just really beat me down. I finally got the nerve to break up with him by the end of the 10th grade. They had built a new high school, which I was district for, and he was still going to the original. So, since I couldn't have to see him every day, I figured it would be a clean break. I was wrong. I broke up with him the first week of summer break. The biggest thing I did not do is switch jobs. I had only had mine for a few months, and I loved it. But unfortunately, because of my ridiculous, bad planning, I worked right outside of his neighborhood. The shopping center was a large L shape, with my Publix being on the tiny part, with 2 or 3 shops leading into the corner. Then the longer piece had more shops, including a pizza place. Fast forward about 2 weeks, and I'm working, not thinking about anything in particular, when he comes in. I knew this would happen because of the location, but didn't think anything about it. It's worth it to point out that our schedule for the day was on a table right before you got to the customer service desk, so everyone who was on that day was on it, including when our breaks were. I get relieved at my 4-hour point, and got to take my hour break in the break room, and had just gotten out my book, and my food to eat, when he comes walking in like he owned the place. There were 2 other employees in there with me, D and K. Both only had a year or 2 older on me. I literally just ignored him after telling him to leave, and that he wasn't supposed to be back here, and told K to go get the store manager since he wasn't leaving, and was obviously not supposed to be back there. This is when he starts crying, threatening to end himself, snotting all over me, and kept trying to grab my hand and hold it. I stayed firm, told him he had to leave, and also said that if he felt like hurting himself, maybe he should have treated me better. Bitch move, I know, but I was royally pissed. It's at this point that he grabs my wrist, so D starts telling him to let me go, and he just tightens his grip on me. About this time, one of the stalkers, who was about 40 and a super cool dad-like figure to me, and W, just walks up to BC, grabs him by the throat, pushes him against the wall, and tells him to leave me the fuck alone. At this point, store manager and assistant store manager come in and go escort him out, accompanied by the local PD, and is banned from the store. I am also assigned a buddy, for lack of the better word, which was always MP. He was an Army MP, or W, depending on who was working, because I was always on shift with one, if not both of them, and they were the biggest dude employees we had. This is when shit got crazy. I usually worked the closing shift during the summer because I was the fastest cashier and didn't mind all the extra work, and was strong as a female, although I was super tiny, to put all the summer furniture and such from outside. About 3 or 4 days after BC was banned, I was outside pulling everything in the lobby for the night when I saw BC standing outside of the pizza place, just watching me. It freaked me out, so I went in and told my manager. And when it was time to go, MP walks me out. There is a note on my car explaining that BC has been watching me, and he even got a job at the pizza place, so he could feel like we were ending our nights together. No, I was getting really angry. I just screamed at him that he's going to call the cops if he doesn't leave immediately, and BC runs off. This goes on the entire summer. The notes, condoms on my car, lunch meat on the windows, and paint. I would rip off whatever he would put on there. He would come in to get crap for his work after volunteering, and then be kicked out as soon as he walked in the doors. Called my house all the time, and ended up with the TPO against his ass. At this point, right when school is starting back, MP and I end up dating. Then, September 11th happens, and MP is activated. I'm upset, and BC is literally the only person I can think of to call, because he had freaked out all of my friends, and they wouldn't talk to me. This, of course, upsets him, and the vandalism to my car gets worse, and we start noticing a vehicle pass by our house at least 20 times an afternoon if I'm at home. MP comes back home for about 3 weeks before he ends up being deployed to FT, Benning. We stayed together throughout the next year, with nothing other than what I had grown accustomed to happening. Then, at the beginning of my senior year on September 11th, 2002, I'd mess up my knee, and I mean hardcore fuck it up. Being the ever so gracious person I am, fell out of the shower and managed to rip apart every single muscle in my leg. Had a full around leg patella dislocation, and ripped the muscle from the long bones. At this point, we know it's going to be a while before I can drive, and my parents give me my car to my sister. So, everything kind of calms down for a few months. MP and I also end things, because he is going to Iraq, and thinks I'm not mature. Then, almost in December, my parents get me a new car. A teeny tiny little Kia Rio, like a burnt cinnamon color, which means dark orange in car speak. Either way, a very noticeable memorial car because it is very ugly. It was a good little car though. This is when he decides to step everything up, ranging from soda all over the paint to smashing in my back windshield. My only saving grace from all the attacks was my moving an hour away to where I live right now after I graduated. I do still get Facebook messages from him and a bunch of our mutual friends almost 20 years later, and I've been married for 15 of those, so I don't know what his plan or thinking was there. It was the summer of 2016, and I had just married my longtime girlfriend. Over the course of our 12-year relationship, we had traveled to the mountains several times in both summer and winter for camping, but also to stay in the nice mountain hotels and snowboard the slopes. Naturally, we both agreed this was how we wanted to spend the first weeks of our marriage. We booked a 20-day stay at a mountainside campground on the other side of the country. We also decided to bring our dogs with us, as they too love being outdoors, and we generally bring them camping anyways. After 2 days of road tripping, we had arrived, quickly set up, and settled in for a good long stay on the mountain. It was very beautiful. A couple of days into our trip, and we had already met a bunch of fellow campers. We are very experienced campers, so we are generally attracted a lot of attention from novice campers asking for tools or supplies as they see we are all well set up. We are usually more than happy to help people get situated if they need matches, cream, or sugar, or help setting up their camp equipment. It was day 4 or 5 when she first made her presence known to us. I will refer to this woman as she or her, as we never learned her name. We were sitting down under the shade of the large pine tree at the edge of our site, drinking beers and playing cards. She seemingly appeared out of nowhere. She was just suddenly right there. "Can I pet your dog?" she said. Even my dogs didn't see her approach, as the very sound of her voice triggered them into a startled frenzy. As the dogs were already worked up already, I politely told her no. Then she just stood there, at the edge of our campsite. Didn't say a single word. Just stood there, sort of existing, but not really doing anything. She wasn't exactly staring at us, or looking at anything in particular. I asked her if she needed anything, and she said no. After a few minutes, she just walked off. I work with people with brain injuries, so I've had my fair share of experiences with unusual behaviors, including people with poor social skills. So I wasn't about to write this person off as creepy just yet, but she had my attention. I casually watched her walk off and enter a campsite across the path, and a few sites down from ours. There was already a small tent set up in the site, but she proceeded to pull an even smaller single-person tent from her backpack and began setting it up. The day prior we saw 2 young girls set up the other tent, and were clearly the occupants of the site. There was no further interaction with her that day, although we did notice that the owners of the other tent on the site were not around at all that day, and we didn't see them return that night. Well, the next morning, I'm walking up to the camp showers to clean up for the day. As I walk past her site, I see she is sitting in her little tent reading a book. The door to the tent is open. I pay no attention and keep on my way to take my shower. When I'm done with my shower and walking back, I notice her tent is now closed, but it's jiggling about, so I know someone is in there. Then she made her presence known in a very big way. Just as I am approaching her site on the way to mine, she unzips her tent, and I immediately see that she is completely nude. She then positions herself just inside the tent at the door, and lets out this over-the-top, full-body stretch, and held her arms way up into the sky while pushing her chest forward like it was some kind of mating ritual designed just for me. While she does this, she lets out what I can only describe as an exotic moan. It was pretty obvious she was putting on a show for me. I continue on my way to my site and tell my wife about the display I had just been witness to. We both laughed it off and moved on with our plans to hike a good trail to the waterfall. The trailhead for this hike was accessible from the campgrounds, so we didn't have to drive to get there. We just walked the additional 2 kilometers to the trail. We walked a good pace, so when we got to the trail, we decided to stop for a few minutes and take some photos of the surrounding mountains before heading into the thicker bush. After sitting there for maybe 5 minutes while my wife is taking pictures, she emerges from the trail that leads towards the campground. At first I thought, okay, just a coincidence. She's staying here, and this is a pretty common trail. But then she sees that I see her, and she stops dead in her tracks and just stands there. Same demeanor as our first encounter. Just standing, not doing anything in particular, but also sending creepy vibes our way. This was the first time that I said to my wife, "I think we have a stalker." Confused. My wife then looks to where I'm looking and is immediately a little creeped out. Once again, I think, whatever maybe, she's just hiking the trail, no big deal. So we continue on the trail at a good pace, and she maintains a consistent distance behind us. Our dogs at this point are a little distracted by her, and our youngest dog keeps turning around to watch her. I got a little fed up with the dog constantly stopping to look back, so I decided we will stop for some water and let this woman pass us. Well, what does she do? But freaking stop walking when we stop, and once again, just stands there. Okay, so now we are genuinely concerned because this is approaching horror, suspense movie creep level, and I start to wonder what this girl's intentions are. Standing motionless at this distance, and refusing to pass us just ramped up the oh shit factor to about 9. My wife and I agree to just give her and cut the hike short by taking the shorter loop, which was only another half kilometer ahead, and head back to our campsite. We managed to get some distance between us by jogging every time we would make a turn, and she was out of sight by then. We didn't see her again until later on that night. That night, my wife decided to take an evening shower at the camp showers. When she returned to our camp, she tells me our stalker was in the bathrooms also taking a shower. This time, however, she was with 2 other girls, and appeared to be getting ready for a night at the club. There was a nearby ski town that was just a few nightclubs and bars, so it was reasonable to see the girls getting ready for a night out. The two girls she was with were the two we saw previously set up at her site. My wife explains that she quickly picked up on the fact that the two girls and our stalker friend were not well known to each other. It was clear that the two girls were close friends with plans to go out partying, and our stalker was making an attempt to be friends, and sort of invited herself to join them in their night out. Now we know the ski town very well, and the girls kept reinforcing that they were meeting at a specific restaurant before going to the bar. It was currently 10:30 p.m., and we know the restaurant they were telling her to go to was closed at 10 p.m. They were lying to her about their plans. The stalker kept asking them to, "Are you sure this place? Are you positive?" They convinced her, and then she left their tent to finish getting ready, while the two friends stayed in the bathroom to finish their makeup. My wife went on to explain how after she left, the two friends were mocking and making fun of our stalker. They were young 20-somethings, acting like little girls in elementary school. My wife has no time for that. Creepy stalker or not, she has had to say something to the girls for their behavior. My wife calls them out on their behavior. Well, putting all the catty bitch bullying aside, the girls explained to my wife that the stalker girl had set up her tent on their site when they were staying with a friend in the ski town. When they returned, they found her living at their site without invitation. She had just taken it upon herself to take a little corner of their site without knowing them at all. The girls said that they were upset with her and trying to make her feel uncomfortable so she would just leave. But she wouldn't leave. Of course, my wife asked them why they didn't just report her to the park warden. The excuse they gave was that they were leaving the next day and didn't want to make a huge deal out of all of this. Whatever happened between them and the fake late dinner plans and clubbing is unknown to us. About 3 a.m. that same night, we were all getting woken to a blood-curdling scream right outside of our camper. At first, I was like, holy crap, that must be a wild animal. My wife is trembling, dogs are barking, and I'm startled but curious. I peel back the window cover to see her standing motionless on the path outside of our trailer. I had the window cover down maybe 8 to 10 centimeters when she appears to make direct eye contact with me. My heart rate is jacked up. What the actual fuck? After gazing in my general direction for what seemed like an eternity, she calmly turns around and walks to her tent. I go make sure our trailer is locked. After a good hour and a stiff whiskey, we manage to get back to sleep. So the next day is Friday. We have friends from a nearby major city coming up to the mountains to spend the weekend with us. We haven't seen them in a while, so we are excited for a couple days together. Well, they are not at our site for 15 minutes, and as they are setting up their tent, she mysteriously appears out of nowhere yet again. Like bam, there she is. But now this time she is actually in our sight. I haven't had a chance to tell our friends about her before she arrived, so they were a little more friendly than I was. She asked me once again if she can pet my dog, who during all of this is barking at her. I think I said something like, "I'm being very friendly towards you right now, so I would prefer if you didn't." She didn't pet my dog, but she also just stood there staring at me like she was considering how she would dismember my limbs. She then notices our friend's tent, as he is still setting up, and comments how it's the same model as hers, although a larger sleeping capacity. My buddy has picked up on the creep vibes, and my general displeasure with her presence, so just gives her the, "Oh yeah, that's cool," and keeps setting it up. Well, she starts grabbing at the tent pegs, and picks up the hammer, and says she will help him set it up because she has experience with it. My buddy declines, and asks her for the tools back. Cue the fucking psychopath stare down, but this time she has a hammer in her hand, adding to the oh shit factor. She literally just drops everything right there and runs off. I go on to explain the last few days to our friends, and they agree we need to keep an eye on her. So by this time, the two girlfriends whose site she had hijacked were packed up and gone. It's now Friday night, and we've been drinking all day, so we're feeling very good. It's maybe about 11 p.m. when she walks over to our site yet again. She says, "Hey, you guys seem to have a lot of extra room with the tent and the camper. Do you think that I could stay with you guys tonight? We could have a lot of fun in there together." My buddy is feeling pretty good from all the day beers, so he's pretty forward when he replies, "Did you just propose a gangbang to us?" Now this whole time, I'm just sitting in my camp chair with my whiskey, taking all this in. She wasn't really taking notice to me at all so far. Then she smiles, turns her head, and looks directly down at me and says, "I like your friend." She then turns around and walks away into the darkness of the night towards the forest. We were all now terrified. She was going to return. I decided right then and there that if we see her again in a creepy fashion, I am calling the park warden. This is really getting silly. Well, the night is winding down, so we all decided to walk together to the bathrooms to clean up for bed. My wife pulls on my hoodie and says, "Babe, look." I look over to see that the site she has set up on is completely destroyed. Everything is everywhere. Just stuff, garbage, clothing, and food. Everywhere. I thought, okay, this is weird. Could this have been a bear? No, we would have heard it. I then noticed that the tent is gone. She is gone, and left the site a complete mess. As luck would have it, the park patrol was completing their fire rounds, and were at the messed up site when we were returning from the bathrooms. We told them there was a girl staying on here who was acting erratic, and we suspected she was squatting on the site based on our conversation with the two girls from earlier in the week. We didn't see her again for the rest of our trip until the last full day. There is a great little lookout point not far from our site, which has amazing views of the river and valley below, and it was a perfect evening to see the sunset behind the mountains. It was a lovely final send-off to an otherwise beautiful honeymoon. Just when we thought we were done with her, she emerged once again from seemingly nowhere. We were sitting on a couple of chairs that are bolted in place at the viewpoint, taking pictures of the valley below. As my wife is looking through the camera viewfinder, she picks up on the woman in the distance. She is standing in the woods a little ways down the mountain towards the valley, just watching us. As her final act, she walked up the mountainside and sat right beside us on a boulder that was beside the chairs. She says nothing to us, just sits there. My wife has the brilliant idea of asking me to take one last picture of the scenery, and she gives me a little wink. I pick up on her idea right away, and I position myself so this woman is going to be in the picture. My wife wanted this lady's photo in the event something bad happens with her before we can leave the area. We took our final looks out at the beautiful scenery and headed to our camp for the night. We didn't see or hear from her again. On reflection, we agreed this woman had some serious mental health issues, obviously. She had zero social skills, and we did witness her attempt to make friends with those two girls that shafted her in the terrible way. That being said, she did things way beyond the realm of social awkwardness. There were moments when I thought she would pull out a knife and just end us all where we stood. More than that, the stalking, the midnight screaming, and running off into the woods at night was terrifying to us, and I feel a story worthy of this. I do have photos of it on a thumb drive somewhere. I know it seems odd to keep something like that, but it's a reminder of our wild adventure and start of our amazing marriage. To our honeymoon stalker, I really hope that you don't bother anyone else ever again. So this is a bit of an older story, as I'm in my late 20s now, and this happened while I was in high school, junior year. On mobile, so I'm sorry for any errors or spelling mistakes. When I was about 17, I was dating a kid who went to the same regional high school as me. He lived in the city that was next to my small town, so the kind of environments we were used to were completely different. You would walk barefoot down the street in my town, or leave your front door unlocked at night. You could definitely not do that where he was from. Anyway, one day our school was an early release day, and myself and my boyfriend, we'll call him D, and his friend Jay all decide to walk to Jay's house to hang out. It was a long walk from school to Jay's house, but it was in broad daylight, and there were 3 of us, so we didn't feel uncomfortable walking through the rougher parts of the city. I paid close attention to the route we took, walking along the busy and unpopular street with storefronts, through an alley, and in back of an old factory building repurposed to hold a boutique and a sports supply shop through an area with some construction. I'm normally bad with directions, but these landmarks helped me to figure out the path we took. We finally arrived at Jay's house and get some snacks, hang out at a local playground to use the swings. Then Jay has to leave to go to guitar practice, and Dee and I hang out on our own for a bit. Dee eventually gets a call from his mom saying that he has to come home because of some dumb reason. I won't get into it, that's a whole nother story. And I'm left on my own. So now I'm in this park, in the middle of the city, by myself. Okay, I say to myself, I know how to get back. Just go to the landmarks. This is how I have to navigate. I start working my way backwards through the street we took, through the construction area, past the factory building, through the alleyway. It was daytime, but these were supposed to be the most sketchy areas our trip took us through. I made it through them just fine by myself. I finally came to the busy street with the shops. Cars passed every few seconds, and there were people coming in and out of shops almost constantly. It was broad daylight, and the area was well kept and neat. It should have been the safest way to get home, right? As I am making my way to the sidewalk, a car pulls down a side street in front of me. I think that he's trying to merge onto the main street and into the traffic, so I stop to let him go. Instead of pulling forward, he rolls down the window. It's an older man, maybe early 60s. No real discerning features other than short gray hair. Seems normal enough. He speaks to me. Excuse me, do you know how I can get to Jefferson Street? I'm not from the city, so I honestly wouldn't know how to give him directions. But it's a pretty well-known street there. There were tons of major businesses on that street. It seems weird for an adult not to know how to get there. It was like not knowing how to get to Main Street. But I was a kid who didn't drive, so I didn't know. No, sorry, I don't know. Are you sure that you don't know how to get there? Nope, I'm sorry. He pauses for a moment. Why don't you get into my car with me, and you can show me how to get there? Wait, what? Now, if you've ever been in a weird situation like this, you might be familiar with the time stop sensation. It's like you're looking at everything from far away for a moment, and you can take everything in. In this moment, I'm thinking of a few things. This guy just pulled up to a 17-year-old girl, in broad daylight, on a busy street. He's blocking my path. I just told him that I don't know how to get to Jefferson Street, but he's now asking me to get into his car to show him how to get to Jefferson Street. What? Those little red flags are popping up everywhere. The buzzers and sirens and stranger danger lessons my parents taught me since I was in primary school are screaming in my brain. And if this guy's weird vibes didn't show up before, they were now. I didn't like what I was feeling. This guy was either a creep or just completely senile. I look at the old man, and am wary of him. Part of me is telling me to turn around and just walk away. Sorry, I can't. I'm gripping the strap of my backpack. His face changes. I had never actually seen this kind of thing happen before, where someone's face actually makes a shift. And this is the only time I've ever seen it. He immediately looks angry. He doesn't seem like a senile old man anymore. He yells, "Just get in the car, now!" He confirms the bad feeling in my stomach. For me, the adrenaline is now flowing, and I am both scared and angry at the same time, just at the balls of this old man. I don't know why this came to mind, but all I could do was yell, "Fuck you!" I'm standing on the sidewalk with my backpack. There's barely anything in it other than my phone, notebook, and some toiletries. There's nothing I can use to defend myself. I'm trying to figure out how big this old man could be, but I can't tell. I'm only 126 pounds soaking wet at this age, with a little upper body strength. I don't know if I can do anything if he decides to get out of the car. He's by himself, but what if he has a knife? I have to go in front or behind this car just to keep taking this route home. If I do, will he try to hit me? Will he try to knock me down or back over me with his car? I felt like all of these thoughts were happening in an instant, and I'm confused. I just want to go home. He stares at me from inside the car with his look of anger, but he doesn't say anything. It's just silent between us other than the sound of the cars going by, and he's just staring. It was only like this for a few seconds, but it felt like forever. Once the road is clear, he peeled out into traffic and was gone. I was left standing in the sidewalk of that busy street, confused, tired, and shaking with adrenaline. I just kept thinking to myself over and over, what the fuck was that? I'm not sure whatever happened to that man. I'm sure he has had some sort of plan figured out. Find a girl, ask her how to get to a well-known street, let her list off the directions, pretend to be a feeble old man that needs help getting there, then hope she's naive enough to accept your request of being the co-pilot. I don't think he was counting on someone not knowing how to get to that street. I really hope he didn't go on to perfect this method and use it on some girl or boy in the future. I think back on this now and wonder if I could have reacted differently. I wish if I had seen his license plate at least. I don't think that just because you're on a busy street in broad daylight that you're safe, or that nothing could happen to you. Keep your eyes peeled, be prepared, and don't worry about not being polite. When your gut is telling you something, you better listen to it. This story begins in 8th grade. For context, I'm a white female and was struggling with really bad depression and self-harm, 7th grade to 8th grade in. 2 years clean. Desperately had a big impact on my memory on some sections of my childhood. In this time it is completely blank, so this is as close as I can remember. But this might not be 100% accurate. At the end of the 8th grade, one of my close male friends, Tom, invited me to his birthday party. There was about 10 guys there, and me with my best friend, who was female. I knew about 9 of the guys there, but one I didn't recognize. This party took place in a garden playground area. We played hide-and-go-seek, tag, and capture the flag with fake swords. As the sun began to set, Tom wanted to play hide-and-go-seek in the dark. There was a dark tunnel that went from the play structure to the rest of the park. A majority of us started to run to the tunnel to go and hide. Suddenly, halfway through, hands shot out and tried to grab people's ankles. I tripped and landed on my hands and knees. The second my hands hit the ground, a foot hit my legs as I tripped someone else. The hands in the dark laughed as Tim's friend came out from the dark. The person who tripped over me turned out to be the person I had never met. We went to a bench right outside the tunnel to check for wounds and patch ourselves up. We got acquainted, and he introduced himself as David Whittaker III. He was polite, kind, and easy on the eyes. We had some stuff in common. His birthday was the same as my father's, and he was outgoing and an extrovert. Exactly what I needed to be a more rounded person. The rest of the night was a blur, but we spent most of the night talking. As the party was coming to an end, and people's parents were coming to pick them up, he asked me for my number in addition to my best friend's. He did it in a way that he only really wanted my number, but wanted to be polite. He never seemed creepy in doing this. He wasn't unsettling. He was just a cute boy asking for my number. Davidson, or as he let me call him, Davis, and I spent the next month or so talking about absolutely everything, non-stop, every day. I felt beautiful and wanted. It was comforting. At some point, we became more than friends. We were suddenly dating, but I never wanted to go on a date. I think he convinced me to go on a date, as a group, to some movie, but I don't remember it. The only proof I have of this exchange is a ticket stub and his word. He finally convinced me to go to a real date. I wore some jean shorts and a t-shirt. He chose the location of a museum in the city. If you know me, you wouldn't know there's only 3 museums I like in the whole world, and I hate normal museums. As a kid, my mom forced me to go to all of them whenever we traveled, and I got sick of them quickly. He picked me up from my house, and now knew where I lived. I didn't think anything of it at the time. After we went to the museum, I went out to dinner with him and my mom at my favorite Thai place. I even have an awkward photo to remember that moment by. After the date, however, he sent me lewd thoughts he had that whole date with me. We had attempted sexting before, but I wasn't that involved. I'd send a yeah or a daddy every 20 lines or so. I've always been a people pleaser in both ways, and just wanted him to be happy. But this time it felt off. It felt real. I couldn't pretend someone else was sexting him. It was about me, and I didn't like that. It made me feel uncomfortable, and so I just buried that feeling deep. This was the first thing that felt off about him. After that, things got worse. I wanted space sometimes, and he didn't like that. I would take a 30-minute shower and get back to 50 to 100 messages from him. He started to make it racial. He's an African American, and kept on talking about how I needed some of his cocoa. My family is from the deep south, so anything racial makes me deeply uncomfortable. His messages got more explicit. He would detail any wet dream he had about me and how it made him feel. It all made me so very uncomfortable. Finally, I had enough of this. I told him it was over, and we needed to stop. It was only about 2 to 3 months, but I couldn't take it anymore. I told him no. He tried arguing with me. He said it wasn't fair. He said I needed him. He said he cared about me. He said I was the only one. I said no again to him. That didn't matter to him. We were meant to be, and my no meant nothing to him. That definitely scared me. I told him I wouldn't feel safe anymore around him, and how much I hated what he was doing. I told him I wasn't comfortable anymore because he didn't know the meaning of no, because I was scared he was going to rape me. He said he'd never hurt me, ever. I told him to stay away from me, from my house. He showed up at my doorstep. My parents invited him in because they thought we were still dating. I was so ashamed it wasn't working out, but I couldn't just say anything. He stayed for the food before I was able to get him out. I told my parents shortly after he left to never let him return. He continued with the one-sided sexting. He sent nudes. He sent 13 roses when I didn't talk to him for a week. I threw the roses out the window. I've always hated flowers because they die too quickly, but he never bothered to even ask me. He showed up at my doorstep again, even when I begged him not to. My dad told him through the door to go away, as I cowered in my living room. He scared me so much. I was never safe. Every guy around his height with his hair cut gave me a fright. I was terrified he would see me and do things to me. I got a boyfriend freshman year, John, a timid guy who I could break if I hugged him too hard. John's heart was made of gold. He made me feel safe. Yet Davis persisted. He texted me daily, begging me to stop cheating. He thought we had been dating this whole time. I tried everything, besides disengaging. I told him I was gay now. Not entirely wrong, though. I told him I was transitioning to male. He is very straight, and this was never meant to belittle trans individuals. Yet, what shook him the most was when I gave myself an undercut. Not my hair. He treated it like I was damaging his property. This just kept persisting. Unrelated to him, I went to a therapeutic boarding school end of freshman year. I got the help and support I needed because I had tried to hurt myself during freshman year. I got better and off my depression meds. I was gone from technology and texting for 13 months and 12 days. I thought I was better when I came back, that I had matured and could handle him. I messaged him August 20th, beginning of junior year, that I thought we would work it out. Almost verbatim, he said, "All those other girls meant nothing to me. You were the only one for me." And he also said that we had been dating since that night in 8th grade. I was naive and thought I was in control, so we tried to make it work. I had 2 rules. 1, you will never see me in person. 2, I initiate when we talk. I still felt scared of him, and these rules made me feel safe. He told me he drove by my house every time we went to swim practice, and that he missed me. I was having none of it. I said he had 3 chances, and it was over, but he probably broke them 20 times. Junior year, September, I got back with John. He made me feel safe. I told him about Davis, and he was nicer than he should have been about my mistakes with him. We laughed at the stuff Davis said, but deep down, I was scared. I still am scared. I had enough when I was scrolling back through our old messages. I said no, and replied, but my cock said yes. I told him that I was done, and I blocked him in November. I unblocked him on Valentine's Day, and he sent about 20 messages about how much he missed me, and the exact day count since I had last talked to him. It scared me. I blocked him immediately without replying. My 18th birthday was riddled with fear because I told Davis that I couldn't have sex with him until I was 18 because of morals or whatever. That's what I thought at the time, but now I know it was just fear. He knows my school, he knows my address. My current best friend is trained in martial arts and self-defense for a decade, so I hung to her all day. What should have been an exciting day of adulthood was riddled with fear that he would just show up. I haven't blocked him since last Valentine's Day. I haven't talked to him in almost a year and a half. Yet, I'm still scared some days. Scared that the man who is obsessed with me is right around the corner, watching me. I questioned myself for a very long time, but finally came to the conclusion that I was, in fact, stalked. It all started when I began a new job as a lifeguard and swim instructor at a university pool. The first person I ever shared a shift with was a guy named Harry. He was fairly odd, quite socially awkward, and had a quirky sense of humor. However, after the first couple of weeks of work, Harry started to strike up some pretty deep conversations with me. He asked me a lot of personal information about my family, how I grew up, what I enjoy, my relationship with my now husband. This didn't strike me as particularly odd, as I'm a very extroverted, social human being, and I love talking to people about my life. His questions started to have a lot more depth, as he began asking me deep questions about the meaning of life, my faith, and my beliefs. I'm a Christian, so I saw this as a great opportunity to explain what I believe and why. Harry began to open up about his family life in a way that made me very uncomfortable. He described his parents in a way that made me feel like he had no emotional connection to them, even though they were very clearly emotionally connected to him. He would describe his mother as being passive and stupid, unwilling to stand up for herself, and her father as living in fear by over-controlling Harry's actions. As time went on, the way he talked got more extreme. He kept talking about how he was different from everyone, and how he was a monster. A few times, after our late night shifts, he would drive me home to my house. I often walked, but I took him up on his offer to drive me when I could. He would talk to me a lot during our shifts, which as it is, isn't the smartest thing to do as a lifeguard. One time, a lady hopped into the deep end who didn't know how to swim. I saw it and ran to the scene, but he just watched. I asked him later why he didn't come and help me, but he shrugged it off like it wasn't a big deal. He also began to self-disclose a lot of personal information that I felt like we weren't at the right level of our friendship for. He told me he was a virgin, and then told me he wanted to have sex so he knew how it felt. He texted me when he lost his virginity, without any protection, by the way, and said that he gave the girl pleasure, but that he didn't feel anything, and just finished on his own. A few weeks into his relationship with this girl, he texted me saying that he thought he had AIDS, which he doesn't have. All of this information might seem like unnecessary details. I know, but there are details that are embedded in my mind that make me wonder how I could have missed some of these signs. Harry continued to text me about his emotions and lack of empathy towards others. He also talked about his plan to leave his parents. He lived at home at this time and moved to Australia. He had several $1,000s saved up, which he occasionally made me think he would give to me. In a conversation once, he casually mentioned, "I don't know what to do with all my money," and then later went, "Man, I could just give it all to you." He said it half joking and half serious, but with a tone that made me wonder if he understood the gravity of what he was saying. I was an engaged college student trying to pay for a wedding and live on more than just my rent every month. He knew that very well, but lorded his money over me without a thought that it might be a cruel thing to do. He continuously talked to me about an empty property that he had keys to, and how he liked to have his friends there to explore the house. I didn't think much of it, but I started to get a really weird feeling about the things that he was telling me. I was open with my fiancé about the text he was sending me, and the types of questions that he was asking. We both agreed it wasn't comfortable for either of us. He continued to text me late at night, saying that I was one of his only friends. He often talked about his mental health and how he wanted to end things. He also talked about how smart he was, and that he was at genius level of intelligence, and everyone was stupid and empathetic. Many of our conversations circulated around these topics, as well as his sex life, and some of the dumb decisions he was making at risk of his own health and others. The turning point happened late one night, at 1 a.m. or so, when he sent me a text asking a hypothetical question that I knew wasn't hypothetical. He said, if I drive over and knock on your door, will you say, Harry, it's too late, go home? Or will you either willingly let me into your house, or exit your house to take on the world with me? I was confused and asked him to elaborate. And he said that he had the keys to his house, and asked if I wanted to explore it with him. It should be noted that the house was in a very sketchy part of town. I said no, and told him that I wouldn't be very comfortable doing that with anyone, especially on that side of town. However, I got the feeling that he was at my door, and sure enough, when I looked out my window, I saw him walking back to his vehicle from my doorstep. That was the most distinctive moment that I thought to myself, he might be a stalker. I had a panic attack and called my fiancé. We were a long distance at this time, and pulled my roommate into my room so that I could explain the situation to them. In the following weeks, Harry continued to text me daily, if not hourly, asking me where I was, and if we could meet up somewhere. I often lied, or made up excuses about why I couldn't. Eventually, he said he would be leaving for Australia, and was planning on deleting all his social media. He asked me for my email address, and any other possible way of staying in touch with him, which I very guiltily did not give him. Finally, he left. I felt so much relief, and felt like I wasn't being watched anymore, or had to worry about something happening to me. It took me a really long time to acknowledge that he was a stalker. I decided to ask some female co-workers about him, especially ones I had heard were very close to him. The first thing that I noticed was that there was a type. We were all blonde, curvy, strong-willed women, and we all had the same kinds of interactions with him. We would listen to him and have conversations with him, and he would text us all late at night. Later, I brought up his stalkerish tendencies to a coworker who had similar experiences, and she mentioned that the house he kept referring to was where he would take women to have sex with him. There were many moments I wondered if he might be a sociopath, possibly higher functioning at least, or had some other mental health issues going on, besides his major depression. He was isolated as a child in a very strict religious environment, and wasn't allowed to go anywhere. Anyways, maybe that's way too much information for this sub, but I need a place to vent with people who understand what it feels like to be stalked. It might not be a particular extreme example, but it haunts me to this very day. This all happened about exactly a year ago, and I really hope that Harry doesn't get into contact with me ever again. And I hope that he gets the help that he really needs. I'm a gay guy who started his first semester of college this past August, and I'm pretty sure that I have a stalker ending the semester. It all started in early September when I met this guy, we'll call him Tim, at a QSA meeting. We became quick friends, and that week he started flirting with me, saying we would be a cute couple, and stuff to our new friends, who all cheered it on, and thought that it would be great. I laughed it off because I didn't want a relationship, and he hadn't been in one before, so obviously nothing is going to happen. But only a week later, Tim began talking about how he believed in love at first sight, and how he thinks he's in love with someone to some of our mutual friends. At one point, he went on a date with a guy, Peter, from our group, and Tim ended up turning Peter down because he liked me. I found out about this early in September, but I never told him that I did. We stayed friends, and I tried to figure out my feelings for him. I wasn't sure if I liked him as a friend or more, Until one night in early October, we were hanging out with 2 other friends when he told me that he's about to be heartbroken, and then an hour later tells me that he likes me. With our friends in the room, I told him that I wasn't sure if I liked him, and I wanted to take things slow. The next day, he showed up outside one of my classes when he was supposed to be in class. He was standing right outside of his classroom door and mine at the end of the hall. As soon as he saw me leave, he ran to me and started talking about how excited he was to see me, and insisted on walking me to the cafeteria because Tim knew that's where I go after class. A big red flag, I think. I told him to get back to class, and after some protesting about how he can't focus and stuff, he gave in and went to class. Later on that day, we were going to catch a movie on campus with my roommates, and we decided to go for a walk first. I realized very early on during this walk that I did not like him as more than a friend, and we had nothing in common with one another. There was nothing to talk about besides our mutual friends. But apparently, he did not get the same vibe, because he asked me for a relationship. The day after I said, let's take things slow, I told him no, that I wanted a friendship, and he responded with, well, that's how relationships start, right? And Tim came to watch and gave me a big hug afterwards, which I hugged him during. Then we decided to sit next to each other along with other friends and watch the rest of the show. We ended up going back to that friend's dorm, ordering food, and watching a movie. 4 people all night long. But apparently that was not enough for him to think that we were together, because that's what he started to tell everybody. He told every one of our mutual friends that we were dating. I didn't talk to him for 4 days. I didn't even as much as look in his direction. I figured that he could get the hint, since we were never actually dating. I don't like confrontation, and if I'm not dating somebody, why do I have to break up with them? I didn't know that he was telling people that until after the next incident. One day, I sat down next to him in a room because it was the only empty seat, but I still did not talk to him or even acknowledge him because he was being very creepy towards me. Tim gets up to leave because he's got a meeting, and Tim decides that this means he can give me a hug. Around my neck, as I'm sitting at a computer, with my arms outstretched, I froze and didn't say a word, but as soon as he walked away, I broke down into a panic attack. I just couldn't deal with that anymore, because apparently 4 days of no communication whatsoever didn't mean anything to him. He didn't even try to reach out to see what was happening. Later that day, I tell him that I'm not ready for a relationship, and that we are not dating. He tells me, maybe in the future, to which I shoot him down immediately, and he gets a bit upset, but seems to understand. He tells me to have a great rest of the semester, and I figured that was going to be him leaving me alone. We were still going to be in the same friend group, but we didn't have to really be that good of friends. We can just exist in the same place. Fast forward 2 weeks of weird stares and side comments about how handsome I am, that I'm not saying anything to because I'm the mean guy who broke Tim's heart. And it's the week of Halloween. I get a notification from Snapchat that someone just screenshotted one of my posts, and I check it, and I see it was Tim. A little weird, but maybe it was a mistake. Until I get another notification saying the same thing, on another one of my selfies. There ended up being 6 screenshots taken over a 2-day period of my selfies that I posted on my Snap story by Tim. I started to freak out by this point, and I was going to confront him, but then a more terrifying incident occurred. I was sitting at a table with my friend Anna and Tim, and when Tim pulls out a knife randomly, he holds it to his hand and says, I know that if I try hard enough, this will go through, and my friend Anna tells him to put it away. He just looks at me and smiles as he puts away the knife. Then he goes on to ask if we've seen his Twitter lately, which I had because I had become increasingly concerned. He was retweeting posts about being in love with someone who doesn't love him back. Tim made tweets about how he was still in love with someone and how he wished that person didn't feel uncomfortable. He also made tweets saying that he was going to harm himself because of people in his life. That Friday, which was the day after Halloween, I went to a small Halloween party, and Tim was there. I got drunk for the first time. 7 mixed drinks, 5 Jell-O shots, and 3 shots of vodka. I was pretty done in, and Tim took 2 Jell-O shots. He began to act like he was drunk, but it was clearly an act just to try and fit in since everyone else had been drinking. We decided to play a game of truth or dare, and Tim sat on the ground next to me. Throughout the game, he kept making comments about me and moving as close to me as possible, to the point where I got up and moved. At one point, Peter, who dared to seduce me, after about 10 seconds, we both started laughing and thought it was hilarious, but Tim got really angry about it. He started saying how it was making him uncomfortable, and how Peter should respect me, and how I was Tim's. He called me by my Tyler at one point. He also got angry at me and my friend Courtney when I was dared to take a Jell-O shot off of Courtney. I don't even like girls, mind you. Tom basically started to tell me how I should respect him and how uncomfortable I was making him. But since I was drunk that night and not thinking properly, and this kid, Tim, said that he needed a place to crash for the night, my stupid brain offered up my dorm. He crashed along with my friend Peter in the living room. The next morning when we all got up for breakfast, every single time that I talked, Tim was staring at me. He had done that before, but this time I was scared. He kept making comments about how cute of a drunk I was, and how he wished I was more honest with him. I'm brutally honest drunk. And again, he kept making comments about how uncomfortable he was when I was touching or doing anything with anyone else. At this point, it started to affect my mental health. Jay had 12 panic attacks and missed 9 classes in 1 week because I was scared that he was going to be outside my lecture halls. He had done so before, but he sat in a chair outside, so I don't know if that's where he waits, or if it is because he knows I have class in there. I just couldn't. I had a breakdown and had to practically be carried to the campus counseling center by 2 of my friends because I was so scared that he would hurt me if I asked him to stop. That day I broke down. I took all of the evidence that I had against him, the threatening tweets, the screenshot posts, the threat he made with the knife, to my college's administration building to get help. For my best interest, they had me place a no-contact directive against him, which was basically 1 step below a restraining order. But it doesn't end there. After the order was filled, he showed up another drag show I was in and sat in front and center. Tim stared at me when I was off stage, and he looked very angry. I thought he was going to do something. I was so scared. He left right before I went on, but that was only because my roommates made sure of that. I didn't see him afterwards, but I broke down again that night because I was so scared he was going to show up and hurt me. Now, every time we are in the same vicinity, he stares at me. He'll be sitting in a chair as I'm walking down the hallway, and he's just following me with his eyes down the hall. Or I'll be 1 table over, and he'll just talk about how close he is, and how he can't believe he's here, and stuff like that. It's not breaking the order because he's not directly coming up to me, and not directly making threats to me, but he won't stop talking about me. From the few people who still talk to him, I've heard he's pretty obsessed and wants to make up with me. He wants me to drop the order so that he can, if he tries to talk to me now, he can either be arrested or expelled or both. But apologize and prove that he is better now. Some people keep telling me that he is reaching stalker territory, or that it could have easily gotten there. Was it? I don't know what to label what happened to me. What's still happening at this very moment? Do I have a stalker? Or is this dude just really, really creepy? For reference, I work as a barista in a coffee shop inside a larger store. I am one of a handful of male baristas at my shop. I am gay and very open about this. I wear pride shoes. I have a pride flag attached to my name tag, and I have a couple of wristbands with rainbows and phrases like Orlando Strong and a local LGBT plus center. So, the other day I was working my shift at a register. A gentleman comes up to me and smiles. I think he noticed the pride flag on my name tag, and he didn't explicitly mention it at first. He says he doesn't know what to order and asks for my opinion. Now, I'm not particularly a coffee drinker, but I know what drink fits what taste. So I ask him what he likes. and I try to give him some recommendations. As I'm talking, I can tell he's paying more attention to me than to what I'm saying, which I am completely okay with. He was a shorter, well-built man, had beautiful eyes, a nice beard, basically the perfect DILF. Eventually, he decides on a super sweet iced coffee that we have, and I go to make it for him. As I'm making the drink, one of my coworkers leans over and whispers, "I think that customer just took a picture of you." That was a bit of a red flag, but I thanked her and kind of brushed it off. I gave him his drink, and he smiles. He points to the pride flag and says, "I love that flag. Where can I get me one of those?" I laughed and said I got it from a pride event I went to a few years ago. He then said, "And where can I get the person it's attached to?" I immediately feel a rush, and I start blushing, but trying to act professional, I brush it off. He eventually takes his drink and sits at one of the tables. I continue going out about my day, debating whether I should give it to this guy or not. Every now and then, I should glance at his table to see him looking at me. No matter when I looked, it seemed like he was looking directly at me. I started to get that weird feeling of heart eyes with red flags. Then I noticed that he wasn't taking a single drink out of his coffee. Remember, it was an iced coffee, so I could see the clear plastic cup. When I have a break and go to wipe down some of the tables, I stop by his table and ask if he didn't like the drink. If not, I could make him a new one free of charge. He hands me the drink and mentions he's not sure if it's too sweet for him or not, and asks me to try it. I politely decline, telling him I don't drink coffee. He's shocked and asks me why I'm working here and blah blah blah. As we're talking, though, his questions start to change. "So, do you lift at all?" "No, not really." "Well, how much do you think you could lift if you had to? The job requirement is 50 pounds, so I guess at least that much." "Well, I've learned it's good to be able to lift at least half your body weight. How much do you weigh?" Immediate red flag goes off. There was something about the combination of the drink and the two questions that made me feel like I was being asked how much of a fight I'd be able to hold, especially if I was drugged. I've been drugged at a party before, and these things are red flags that I have learned to pick up on. So I kindly and quickly end the conversation and go back to cleaning up tables. As the hours go by, he continues to sit there, not drinking his drink. Other employees and a couple of managers ask if everything's okay, and he says he's perfectly happy. Every now and then, he takes a phone call, and at one point I swear I can see a guy on his phone at a different part of the store talking opposite of the guy at the table. Suddenly, I start to feel like there's more eyes on me than I realize. I pull one of my managers to the back and tell him that I'm getting a weirder and weirder feeling about the guy, and the manager says we'll keep an eye on him. Now was closing on this shift, and so as we got closer and closer to closing time, I noticed him still sitting there. When the announcements that the store is closing in half an hour is made, he comes up to the counter and asks if he could walk me to my car after I get off. I tell him our closing duties take us at least 45 minutes after we close, and he says he's happy to wait. I politely decline, and he asks when I work next. I tell him I'm off for a couple of weeks. "Well, then I feel like I should walk you to your car, especially if I might not be able to see you for a couple of weeks." "No fucking way." I politely decline, and eventually he leaves. I finish my closing duties and head to the employee area. As soon as I get down there, I tell one of my managers about the situation and ask if I can take the side exit from the store. At our store, we exit out of one of the main doors after we close, but there's a side door that we can use to get into the building before we open, and that the managers use to get out after we close. He agrees and tells me he'd walk me to my car to make sure that I'm okay, if I'm cool with waiting a little while, which I am. So I walk out of the door with a couple of managers. I get into my car, and as I'm driving away, I see a large van with extremely tinted windows parked in front of the front door. There's no way to know for sure if my customer was in that van, and if it was as ominous as I thought it was, but I know that I was not about to stay to figure out, and I took a long and winding path home that night. So, to the very hot guy that I sold my coffee to, please don't come back into my store. Unless, of course, I just read all of these things wrong, and you're just socially awkward, and were actually into me. And not in a creepy way, but just to be on the safe side. Don't come back into the store. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.